Thanksgiving is next week. If you've been waiting to share the things you're most thankful for in the cube space, this is the time. Follow the link in the show notes to find out how you can be part of the episode that we're releasing next week to celebrate the things that you are most excited about. Now on to my conversation with Sam about TLDR and the circle of life. Welcome to Recross the Paths. My name is Cade. Today, I am here with Sam. Welcome, Sam.
I feel welcome. Glad to be here.
That's important. Well, then my job is complete. Folks may also know Sam as FinMint online. You have a couple of cubes that I find so fascinating, and I'm so excited to get to sit down and chat with you today. So thanks for taking the time to be here.
Again, I'm really happy to be here. Very excited. Not every day you get to be on a podcast.
That's true. That's true. So you are, Sam, right on the heels of CubeCon, as we were joking about before, kind of still recovering perhaps physically from the trip, kind of getting our feet back under us here, but lots to learn from the two cubes that you took to CubeCon.
Yeah, absolutely. I still very much recovering, though I'm ready to get back on the horse this weekend. My LGS likes to do cube nights every Saturday. Really excited for that. Really excited to bring back changes from CubeCon, any modifications to both cubes from there. Got a lot of really positive feedback.
CubeCon, certainly one of the largest cube events extant, a good opportunity to get your cube in front of a number of different folks who may have not played it before. The two cubes that you brought with you to that event, would you mind introducing us to those right quickly?
Yeah, sure thing. So the first one, the older of the two, is the TLDR cube, otherwise referred to as the Too Long Didn't Read cube.
The fact that it has an abbreviated title feels even more appropriate somehow.
Exactly. And then the other one is the Circle of Life cube. That one's about a year old at this point.
So each one of those has a particular either limitation or rules change. I thought it'd be nice to unpack those a little bit, talk a bit about what you learned from your CubeCon experience, and just kind of getting a sense of what it's like to take your cube to an event like that, and then what you take away from that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk about the TLDR cube first. So that one is relatively straightforward. The rule of the cube is that no card in there can have more than 5 lines of rules text. That's pretty much it. Everything else is kind of fair game.
Does that include reminder text?
It used to not be the case. I basically gave a card a free pass if it had a reminder text after the base rules text. But I decided that didn't really gel well with the optics of what I was going for, so I decided to make it more restrictive after the fact. So in its current iteration, yeah, I do include reminder text provided the card has reminder text.
So RIP if you're using Explore with reminder text, for example. Like there's just no hope of that.
I actually went out of my way to exclude anything with Explore on it because there's an element of the cube that is geared towards accessibility, and I'll be honest, in my opinion at least, Explore is one of the least accessible keywords in the game, especially if you have a card that just says, this explores X times on ETB, or, God forbid, if anything makes map tokens, that's even more confusing.
The same, this is hurting me specifically because I like Explore, but I totally understand it from an accessibility perspective. Like it is a lot of nested ideas and mechanics, and especially the map token. It's like you have to know what Explore does and what the map token does, like to get there.
Just looking at that token, it's just a wall of text. And don't get me wrong, I also love Explore, at least for the aesthetics and the thematic purpose of it. Ixalan is one of my favorite planes in the entire multiverse. And it also broke my heart that I had to take out so many of the Explore creatures from there. It just didn't feel right.
So then for the TLDR, we have this limitation set in place. What else does that limit? Like, is that something that puts a cap on power level, on certain things that you can't include?
I think it inevitably kind of put a cap on power level. There are some things that you can do to really up the ante on that, but by and large, a lot of the cards in the cube are more to a modern, or in some cases even a peasant plus power level, because of the nature of what is allowed and what isn't allowed in the cube. A lot of modern card designs tend to get relatively wordy, which means a lot of the cards that get included in this environment are kind of rooted in the past. Your things like Acidic Slime or Thragtusk tend to be a lot more simple in nature over, I don't know, take any of the saga creatures from Final Fantasy, you know?
Sure. Well, you have found ways to include some card types that people wouldn't expect. I think there is at least one planeswalker in the environment at present.
Absolutely.
There are a couple others with echo and other like nested keywords, but yeah, you can get a lot of
Yes.
things in there.
I think it's two currently. I know there's a Garrick that I really, really liked to include, and one of the Dombries as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it was kind of my goal to do something like that, or to push the boundaries of my own limitation that I had set on the cube. As much as accessibility played its role in there, I'm also a fan of breaking the rules of my own cube, or at the very least pushing up against them as much as I can. So if I can find a planeswalker that technically has 5 lines of rules text or less, then I'm going to jump on that opportunity so that people can open up their pack and say, wait, there's a planeswalker in here. How does a planeswalker have 5 lines of text or less? That doesn't make sense.
Like I know you immediately start counting when you see it. It's like, are you sure?
Exactly. That was one of those moments that I kind of wanted to gear towards when I was building the cube. I really wanted players to squint at cards and start counting words to make sure that it did, in fact, have 5 lines of text.
How did you get to 5 as the number there? Because I know there are different ideas about how condensed you can be, but why 5?
It was dreadfully arbitrary. I really wanted to be able to, hold up my hand and say 5 lines, 5 lines. That's what we're going for. I thought about making the limit, wordy creatures. Anything that counts as wordy or more doesn't get included. But I am only human, and I'm a pretty weak cube curator. So
Oh, I
there
don't
were
know
a
about
lot of
that.
cards that I liked that I didn't want to see go from the cube. I don't know how to kill my darlings properly, so I wound up leaving it at 5 in the end.
So did you start with a different limitation and then find your way to 5, or was it always like here's the top limit and then start building from there?
I think originally I was going for 6 because there was some card that I still wanted to include. Might have just been Snackcaster Mage if I'm being totally honest.
It's a good one. It's going to include.
And then in the end, the number 6 just didn't really sit right with me from an optics perspective. So I cut that, as well as my dearly beloved Snapcaster Mage, one of my favorite cards in the game. It just doesn't exist in here anymore. It's a shame. Waiting for the right promo.
Yeah, right, right. You have to like have more flavor text in a weird way to crunch the text down to 5
Yes,
lines.
that was actually one of like the most determining factors for a lot of cards in here, is that if it was an extended border card, for example, or something like that, very often those don't have flavor text or anything like that, and that changes the size of the font that Wizards of the Coast uses to print those cards, and very often that meant that what text they did have would get expanded, and it suddenly no longer fits. Master of Death was a great example of this. There was a version of it that I just couldn't use, so I had to settle for the one that had flavor text. But yeah, that was the case for a lot of things in here.
So does that mean that you had to hunt down exact printings on a lot of cards to get the one that works for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The most notorious one, at least at my LGS, was Treetop Village, where it is very specifically the 10th edition foil printing is the only one that fits in the context of this environment. And to this day, I could not tell you why the foiling of a card changes the font of the text box of that card, especially from back in 10th edition. But I just think
Yeah.
it's absolutely hilarious that that was indeed the case.
Yeah, because 10th edition was black border anyway. Yeah, I can't think of why that would be.
But yeah, absolutely. Hunting down specific copies of cards was one of the most interesting aspects of building this cube. Amongst other things, this is only the second one that I built, so I learned a lot of core cube curator lessons in the process of putting this together. The one case where I shot myself in the foot and I've been kicking myself over for the past several months is that apparently I decided to put the surveil lens in here at some point, and as it turns out, the base versions of those cards do not fit in the cube, so I had to trade and or buy the borderless versions, or sorry, the showcase versions for the cube. So I might, in hindsight, that was a big mistake on my part, but I'm glad that I was able to get everything together in time for this year.
Well, yeah, that is a little bit self-inflicted for sure. But I imagine, or at least my experience doing like playtesting here, is that the experience visually is pretty amazing when everything is that compressed.
Yeah, absolutely. The other part of developing this cube is that I was very much trying to occupy a niche in my local play group. As I may have mentioned before, we like to play on a weekly basis at my LGS, and we have a bunch of different curators with a bunch of different goals and visions, between vintage cubes to color restricted cubes to desert cubes, things like that. But what we didn't really have a lot of was just a straightforward environment that we could use to tantalize new players to maybe play more cube with us so that we can always fire with 8 people, that kind of thing. So I was very much trying to what's the I learned this back in like high school biology. It was a phrase like nature abhors a vacuum. So in a similar
Oh,
way,
sure.
I was trying to I was trying to fill in a niche that hadn't yet been occupied.
So do you think of accessibility as a primary goal for an environment like this?
Yes, I think it's kind of what it says in the box. The TLDR cube wants to be as legible as possible. So in a way, accessibility was always a goal of the cube, with some minor exceptions.
I was gonna say you certainly get some really powerful things or some potentially complicated things for simple text. Like some of the most powerful cards ever printed have just one line of text on them.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. You have your Moxon. Soul Ring is just what, two words, maybe?
I was actually going to ask if that was ever a consideration to look at like a powered version of the cube, to, like just to play
Oh,
into that.
I. Oh my god. I'm not even sure. I would. Okay, so cards on the table. I've never been a huge fan of powered environments for the sort of do or die game states that can come out of that. You can only get Channel Emerald so many times before you start asking why you came here to play Magic. That said, though, I'd be very tempted to build like a much lower power version of this cube that maybe does include some power. Because if you're just using your Black Lotus to get out a Sarah Angel or something like that, I could totally get behind that kind of an environment.
See, we're just rebuilding old school now, Sam. I'm having a great time already.
Yes, I would gladly rebuild. You're talking to someone who's building his second pre-modern deck right now. I'm here for the old
Yes.
magic.
Excellent. TLDR being one of the environments you brought to CubeCon, how did you find the players responded based on this idea that you present of accessibility, of card legibility?
It was broadly positive based on the photos that I saw after the fact of what people had drafted in their pools, what performed, what people were putting together in their decks. It was great. And from the people who I had the chance to talk to at CubeCon 2025, they seemed to really enjoy the environment, with a couple card exceptions, which I think I kind of alluded to earlier. There's a card from one of the commander sets in Edge of Eternities. It's called Horizon Explorer, and the guy walks up and he says, Sam, I love the cube. It was really fun. I'm a huge fan of environments like this. Also, I have no idea what a lander token does. And that was
Yes.
and exactly that was kind of my fault. This card makes lander tokens, and because of that restriction that I had placed on the cube, that I do include reminder text in like the limit, this version that fits has to be the one without reminder text. So that was a fault on my part. And there are a couple cards like that in the cube where, like I kind of alluded to before, accessibility is a goal for the cube, but it isn't necessarily the primary goal. I established a
Mm.
rule and I'd like to push up against that. And like I said, I have my biases. There's also a textless Sakura tribe elder that probably shouldn't be in this cube, things like that. So these are both pointers that I want to bear in mind for the cube going forward, that I might want to trim those things out and maybe reconsider even some of the token makers. Like, do clue tokens sort of complicate things too much? Do treasure tokens do the same thing? I'm not entirely sure. I've even got one cascade card in here that probably shouldn't be in here. As cool as it is to have a shardless Asian that just has a single word in its text box, what does that single word mean? Should I basically try to find as many iterations as possible with reminder text and then trim out anything that doesn't fit anymore? Probably.
I imagine that's a really tough balance to strike as a designer and as an enfranchised player, where it's like you know what those things mean. You know what echo means or what flashback means. But for something that you're hoping to share with new players, finding the right way to say, this thing, even though you may not know what it is, let me help you.
Exactly. to that end, something like Karma Guide probably just shouldn't be in the cube in the first place.
Ugh, well, see, that one hurts me again because I love Karma Guide.
Exactly. I don't think I've built a cube and not found a way to shove Karma Guide in there somewhere. Huge fan of the card.
Has there been consideration to not include reminder text for the limitation, or does that go against the spirit at this point?
That was the original version of the cube. Actually, is that I didn't count reminder text. It just didn't feel like it flowed thematically. Like a lot of cards would still wind up with a block of text in their text box, and it just didn't. Again, it was purely an aesthetic choice. Even though I established a rule that I thought would be more restrictive, I still found loopholes around that in the end actually just made things more confusing for players who are using this as a way to get into Magic or Cube in general. For players who might be seeing a lot of these keywords like rebound or eternalize for the first time. So I might go back to a version of the cube where reminder text doesn't necessarily count towards the number, but more likely I would just try to find as many things as possible that do have reminder text on them and then simply cut out anything that no longer fits.
Yeah, with the caveat that even something like CubeCon is not really sufficient data to make large form cuts from, or like make sweeping changes based on. Do you anticipate making significant changes to the TLDR after this experience?
Probably, if I had to guess. Like I said, Karmic Guide and Timeless Dragon, they might be coming out because Eternalize and Echo aren't necessarily new player friendly. More likely than not, I'm going to be taking some cues from a lot of the more popular cubes from this year's event. Environments like Alpha Reimagined are really, really cool. And even though they have some inherently complex cards in them, they did a great job at advertising and showcasing the best parts of simple Magic.
And I think there's something valuable about an event like that where you get to go see other folks exploring in that space and borrow little ideas from other people.
Absolutely. One of my favorite cubes that I drafted there actually counterintuitively was the Brooding Saga cube, which is the absolute antithesis of the TLTR cube. I had a great time with there, but there were absolutely some cards in there where I'm like, what? I had no idea this existed. This will go great in my other cube over here. I'm going to steal this idea. It's a fantastic place to sort of cross pollinate ideas and steal them for your own.
Shout out to Joe for the brooding sagas, the complexity that provides.
Absolutely. As a certified reading hater, it gets my stamp of approval.
Well, the TLDR, as I've given to understand, is not necessarily your baby.
Not necessarily. It used to be, but then along came the Circle of Life cube.
Yeah, there's a great episode of Cube Reviews, the inaugural episode where Ian gets to explore some of this at length almost a year ago from time of recording. So I'm excited to get to revisit this project a little bit too. Can you talk about the Circle of Life?
Yes. It's actually funny how the cube came about. It was entirely by accident. I'd heard about another cube. This was in like CubeCon 2024, I believe, but it's an older environment. His name is Lincoln, if I'm not mistaken. I know him by his Discord name is Capernaumov. I'm going to butcher that
Capernaumov,
pronunciation.
yeah.
Capernaumov, is that how you pronounce it? Okay,
It
I had
is.
no idea.
Lincoln,
but
a wonderful friend. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great guy. He was one of the first people I met at CubeCon 2023, my first year. Fantastic, trying to brew environments or talk Magic. So I heard about his emerging cube in passing last year, and my first impression was that it would be a cube where every creature is treated as though it has emerged, or where emerge played a very fundamental theme. And while that is not at all what the environment is about, and it's a very cool, very aesthetically driven environment, that idea kind of stuck with me a little bit in the back of my head. And so eventually I thought to myself, what would that look like? What would an environment be like if every creature is a SAG outlet? If every creature could be discounted by the things you already have in play, how would that play out? What would be good? Things like that. And eventually the Circle of Life came into existence. It is, in its current form, a desert cube. That's one of the major rules. And everyone starts with an emblem that gives all their creature spells emerge. Those are the two things.
And this is now, I believe, simplified to just be emerge, right? It used to be a slightly different wording of that type of effect to get that outcome.
Yes, actually. In one of the first iterations of the cube, I was a little greedy and wanted the sacrifice creature to be able to contribute its full mana cost to the spell that you're casting and not just the mana value. So, for example, if you use your Goblin Matron to tutor up a Goblin Pile Driver, for example, you could just cast the Pile Driver for free. I really like the idea of that. And in the early stages of the cube, it allowed for this, in my opinion, very interesting Naya Storm list. I really wanted that to be like one of the crown jewel archetypes of the environments that you could build a Naya creature based storm deck, and it could be super cool. But ultimately, it just made things extraordinarily confusing because this is technically a mechanic that doesn't really exist. We have Offering, which allows you to do that, but it also grants the creature you're casting Flash, which is insanely broken, as anyone who drafted the cube this year can attest to. Flash is one of the most powerful mechanics you can really draft in this sort of environment. So because this mechanic technically didn't exist, it just made it very difficult for drafters to parse in the end. So I eventually moved away from that, and it just made it emerge, which is still sometimes very difficult to figure out. What can you pay for with emerge? What can you not pay for with emerge? Everything like that. I always get questions at pretty much every draft that I have at my LGS. Even though this mechanic has been around for 10 years, it's just still confusing to parse sometimes.
Well, around for 10 years, existing in one set. But
Two sets. I think we got one card in a commander deck recently.
oh yeah, is it no, not
It's
Crabomination. That one's
Harrogast. Oh, that's two. That's two. Three sets total. No, I'm thinking of Harrogast, actually.
oh,
Harrogast
Harrogast.
is the
Okay,
card.
Harrogast has a verge. I'm wrong, I think.
When I saw that card, it does the same thing that this cube does. It gives your creature spells emerge. That's when I felt like I had a carte blanche to submit this cube for CubeCon 2025. Could point to any judge and say, see, there's precedence for this in the game. I swear.
I promise. I promise. Just maybe as an aside for us, it turns out there are 3 not from Shadows over Innistrad originally. Just for fun,
What?
Crabomination was one. You mentioned Harrogast is the other. The third is from Doctor Who.
Of course it is.
Adipose
Oh my
offering.
god, the white creature.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Just wanted
It's
to
cool.
set the record straight on that one because I realized I was going to be thinking about that for the rest of the conversation if I didn't.
That is so funny.
But I think that's really interesting that going from an environment like TLDR, where the hope is to bring things down to a level of more people can grasp this, or at least it's not so much to parse through card by card. And then this one started in a place of incredibly high complexity and incredibly high technicality. And even though it's a desert environment, it sounds like you're really working more toward that accessibility side, even for an environment like this.
A little bit, absolutely. Especially since the cube was actually omitted from draft 4 this year because of some concerns with drafts going to time. So I might want to try and simplify things further in the future. I never got the clarification on what may have necessarily led to that being the case. It could be that the cube is a desert environment and that drags people's attention away from trying to parse everything else out. It could be that being an emerge cube, players have to ask judges more questions, things like that. But yeah, going forward, one of my big goals is going to be trimming off some of the fat and trying to make the environment more streamlined.
I guess to be clear, I know we joke about people don't know Emerge, but Emerge just says that you can sacrifice another creature to reduce the spell you're casting's cost by the total mana value of the spell you're or the creature you're sacrificing. And it only reduces generic costs.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you're constantly doing this puzzle of what if this card cost X less? Or like, how do you evaluate these cards that are usually so much more expensive or maybe even late game cards, and they just look different because of how the environment plays.
One of my favorite things about having this cube is just being able to look at this terrible card, frankly, that no one has played in 20 something years, and think to myself, wow, this gets a lot more interesting if it just costs 3 less, or if you can just sacrifice it at any time, things like that. Some of my favorite cards in the cube, they're all cards that you just don't see anywhere. Things like False Prophet is a card from 97, 98, something like that. And I've never seen it played, but my store had one in foil, and I thought to myself, wow, this card is a 4-mana 2/2, which is bad. It exiles all creatures when it dies, which gives your opponent too much choice, usually. But in this cube, you can play it, and then immediately sacrifice it to cast another creature spell, and the trigger goes on the stack in such a way that your creature that you're casting still survives the board wipe. And it's so cool. And
Yeah.
I'm a little worried though. Apparently, someone who I talked to at CubeCon said that he brainstormed with a few of his buddies who had also drafted the cube and said, apparently, there's a loop in here. He couldn't remember the cards, so that's extra concerning, but apparently there's a loop in here somewhere where you could effectively repeatedly exile the board every single turn and just deck your opponent out. So
Oh man.
I gotta find that at some point and see if there's anything I can do about it. Is that something I even should worry about? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's one of those that I don't think Cube Cobra's going to do as good a job at gauging a custom rule in this setup, but you know that your analysis now on Cube Cobra will include potential combos. So maybe a good place to start.
Possibly, possibly. There was a 3-0 deck list that I saw, and my brain was exploding after the fact because this guy had found a loop that I hadn't even considered in testing. Apparently, this is a thing you can do. I wasn't even thinking about it when adding either card in here. Let me pull up the list real quick. So it was Enduring Renewal. Is a card I'm very excited about in this cube. It's really easy to build around in here. For those listening, basically the gist here is that you can infinitely recycle your creatures, more or less. So whenever something you control dies, you return it to your hand. And it's a focal point of some of the Storm lists in here. And that's the reason that I added it in here, because I wanted Red White Storm to be a playable archetype. But apparently, one of the 3-0 lists, I believe, found out that you can just engage in an Eternal Command style lock with Overcharged Amalgam, which is another card that you just don't see getting played at all.
That's the flash exploit counter spell flyer, I think.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. You could essentially just pay 4 to counter one of your opponent's spells every single turn. It's reminiscent of Cryptic Command and, I guess, Mystic Sanctuary is the more modern version, but there used to be some, I don't want to say antiquated, but there used to be some old modern lists that would use Eternal Witness and Cryptic Command to similar effect. And now
Amazing.
going forward, I have to think to myself, is this something that I want to be in the environment? Are the drawbacks of having to pay that kind of mana and never draw creatures again worth being able to engage in this? Is this an interaction I have to worry about? That kind of thing. I'm very excited to see what people do with the cards in here, because for everything that I've predicted, there's so much more that I haven't even touched on.
I mean, truly the fun of being a designer, right? You give everybody the pieces and whatever you intended, they will come up with something very different.
Yeah, absolutely. That was arguably one of my favorite things about being a curator at CubeCon this year was talking to people, hearing about their experiences, and learning about their favorite cards in the cube, what things they were excited for. The greatest compliment that I received all weekend was someone came back and said, I drafted your cube, I drafted goblins, I went 1-2, 10 out of 10 would draft again. And I think as a cube designer and as a game designer, if your players can have a blast while losing, I think that's probably the greatest honor that you could have. Like, congratulations, you've won.
I mean, it sounds like the reception was generally very good for this environment, up to and including the champion of the event.
Yes, that was like the biggest shock to me is that he contacted me on Discord after the fact and said, "Hey, just wanted to let you know this was my favorite cube that I drafted at the event." And I looked at his list after the fact, and yeah, he did the thing. That's the thing that surprised me the most about the event is that people up to and including the guy who took down CubeCon enjoyed it as much as they did. I was very, very scared going in, thinking that this weird environment would just sort of either not fire or, God forbid, people would actively put votes towards it and then just have a miserable time. And while there are some power level concerns that I have to tweak, by and large, people liked it. I'm still riding the high from CubeCon.
So having submitted 2 cubes and having the experience of getting good feedback and actionable feedback, has your willingness or interest to do more things like that in the future changed?
I don't know if I would say that it's changed, but I definitely feel like I want to do more. Like I want to do more in the cube creation space. I've even got like this little miniature roadmap for myself of what I'd like to do for next year. I'm very excited to sort of get back to the drawing board, either make alterations to these existing cubes, make them more refined, better for next year. And I've even got a bar cube that I'm trying to think about as well, because keep hearing amazing things about that and haven't had the chance to go yet. I even want to revisit one of my first cubes that I ever built. It was very much a cards I like style environment. Everyone who's built a cube knows what that's like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the best places to start.
Absolutely, absolutely. I submitted that for CubeCon 2023 and shot myself in the foot almost immediately by changing the cube's link about 20 minutes before the polls went open. This is back when
Hmm.
back when the voting for cubes was very different. So, long story short, I did not get voted for. But I would like to revisit that environment, looking at some of my favorite cubes that I drafted in 2025. A lot of them are very similar. Like Vista's Unventured cube was one of my favorite ones I drafted, and it's very much a love letter to people who enjoy playing specific kinds of cards. Some of my favorite environments that I saw were people just doing everything they could to design an environment around the kind of magic that they love. And to that end, I'd like to revisit some of my own things, knowing what I do now as a cube curator. And I'm very much looking forward to next year.
You mentioned getting good feedback early on, like that was a big part of it. And the crew at CubeCon and really through Hedron Network really do these nice things to make decks and deck lists available so you can see kind of what players are doing. How much of your desires to change, like how much of what you're planning on coming up is based on that kind of feedback or experiences players had? And how much of that is just like you're already constantly in that flow of wanting to design new things?
A lot of the actionable changes that I'm making or planning right now are absolutely based on that feedback. I love to hear about what people had to say. I love my local playgroup. Playing with them is an absolute blast. They're also way too nice. I brought the first iteration of the cube there, and every single person said, "Yeah, I loved it. This was super cool." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, guys, I love you too, but I need to know what's wrong here. I need to figure out what needs to be tweaked." So to that end, I loved getting all kinds of feedback this year, both the good and the
The constructive,
yes, the constructive feedback.
the good feedback and the other feedback.
Exactly. So there was a lot of very, very useful feedback. The big one was that Goblins probably bad, really sad. I loved it. A lot of people really liked it too. And that was the really weird case, actually, is that Goblins generally didn't perform well, but it was the archetype that everyone liked to come back and talk about. So I hate to like sort of take them out to the shed, but I might have to rework the archetype a little bit. Then there's a bunch of other stuff as well. Like blue was way too good, probably. Green didn't show up enough, even though no one mentioned it. Things like that. And then even independent of all this, though, you're absolutely right that there's always more that I want to work with in this cube. It's still, even though I'd consider it a success, given its record at 2025 CubeCon, I still feel like there's a lot more that can be done. Like more skilled cube creators than I could run away with this. There's so much that can be done with just the bare premise that you can cheat on mana and every creature is a sack outlet.
Well, I certainly wouldn't put it to better cube designers, quote unquote. I think, as you've demonstrated through your passion and interest, this is a project that has, that has evolved quite a lot over time, that has continued to be changed and refined. It's like to encourage you in that. It sounds like being able to look at where there are challenges and grow through them is a great thing to be able to do.
It's great to even have the opportunity to do that in the first place. A lot of people were very willing to help walk through my own issues with the cube at CubeCon, offer their own card ideas, things like that. Very grateful to all this very skilled players who took the time to give this cube a shot.
I did want to ask one thing specifically about Circle of Life. How much did you find that the desert element of the draft contributed to weight for players? Thinking like weight heaviness, not like delay.
That was actually, I don't know if I would say even a point of contention per se, but it was a question that came up not just at CubeCon 2025, but also at my LGS, where, as might be obvious, desert cubes are kind of an acquired taste. Some people love them, some people really don't like them. And that was kind of the feedback that I got both during CubeCon and after, where one person really liked the fact that it was a desert cube. They liked being able to sort of weigh their options in draft with lands opposite like haymakers, opposite like how do you want to curve out in a deck like this. And then on the other hand, some people found it to be just kind of a pain to go through that kind of stuff, where they felt that being forced to look at the lands in a pack kind of distracted from being able to think more about the cube's rule and how that affected everything. So I think that may have been one of the contributing factors to the drafts taking a while longer. And on top of that, a lot of people just said that they didn't feel that the desert aspect really impacted their play experience one way or another. It was just kind of neutral, and they didn't feel as though it had been enhanced. I'm not super partial to it, if I'm being honest. I kind of included that in the cube because I really wanted to build a desert cube, and I thought it would kind of be interesting. I don't regret that per se. I really liked being able to build around that in hindsight. But if it means allowing players to focus more on their decks and on the cube's mechanic, and especially on making drafts more timely, then I think I might have to float the idea of eliminating the desert aspect and focusing more on the emerge one.
I've heard advice from different folks suggesting that if there's something unique about the environment, the value of leaning into that. But sometimes you can also enhance an experience by adding an additional element like that. And I mean, I'm a perennial fan of desert drafts, but I can also see where that may be something that, like you said, if somebody's trying to parse a brand new context shift, that's something extra to think about.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of in the same boat as you, where a lot of my favorite environments historically have also been desert ones. I love the ball pit this year. I loved Vistas Unventured. Those were very cool drafts to be a part of. But yeah, absolutely. I can see the value of leaning into, I hesitate to use the word gimmick, but leaning into what makes a cube unique is fair. Even though part of the cube's original vision was very much to sort of compound the mana difficulties to really upend the way that you're playing the game by, both introducing the desert aspect and the emerge aspect, I'm not sure whether that's needed in the current version of the cube.
Well, I just think it's so interesting to consider, and I really appreciate that you've made so much effort to evaluate this environment so much. And sounds like at our current trajectory that one of us will get to have another conversation here in about a year to check in and see where it's going.
Hopefully. I look forward to it.
So, based on your experience here, kind of thinking through what you've experienced with CubeCon, what advice would you want to share with other designers as they consider their own projects?
Get it out there. Have people draft it as much as they can, and don't be afraid of any kind of feedback that they might give. Take everything in stride. And more importantly, submit it to CubeCon 2026. I want to see more interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, truly, it's kind of a hotbed of inspiration in a lot of ways. The number of ideas we see come out of those year to year is really inspiring, even if you're not able to go. Like just kind of getting a sense of what's going on in the broader community.
Absolutely, 100%. It was very much a friend of mine going to the first CubeCon and coming back and raving about how cool the cubes were and showing us some of the decks he drafted that prompted me to build my own first cube later that year. And then from there, we got to see the stuff in CubeCon 2024, and then everything just snowballed. So if anyone else is thinking about building a cube, please do it. It's worth it.
Well, Sam, I so appreciate you sharing on your experience here and what you've been thinking through. As we trend toward wrapping up here, I do want to ask you one of my favorite questions that has a lot less to do with with cube design, I guess. If you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick and who would you have do the illustration?
I know the card and I know the artist. There is. Wait, I don't know the card. wait. I know the card. I just don't know the name of the card. It's.
You were so confident.
Oh my god, I was so confident. Then I forgot one of the words. Songcrafter Mage is the card. I apologize. I love Songcrafter Mage. That is one of my favorite cards that has been printed recently because it is my other favorite card, Snapcaster Mage, but it's a Snapcaster Mage that cares about bodies on the board, and I love that.
Yeah.
And specifically, I would love to see Scott Fisher do an iteration of that, especially because there's a decent chance that there would be a YouTube video of him going through his whole process. I love that artist series of his, watching him walk through every single work, not every single work, but a lot of the ones that he does. So I guess that's it. I'd love to see a mostly full art Songcrafter mage for whatever terrible Pioneer deck I'm brewing up next.
Well, to laud some of Scott's work as well, he has an incredibly broad catalog that spans decades of the game's history. I mean, it's truly prodigious, up to and including one of the vintage tournament. It was one of the Eternal weekends. He did an alternate Black Lotus at one time. Really, just an amazing set of work. If you were picking, would you take like one of his older styles or one of his newer styles for Songcrafter Mage?
Ooh, that's rough. I would be happy with either one if I'm being totally honest, but it's actually weird. A lot of my favorites of him are either the really old ones or the really new ones. One of the first cards I ever okay, so when I was like 9 years old or so, my dad got me a box of like eBay bulk or whatnot. And of course, I got to like go through the cards and look at all the cool, the prettiness and whatnot. And one of the first cards I ever looked at and said, wow, this looks cool was Chain Flinger, which is from like Invasion or something like that. So as much as you're tearing me apart here because like on the one hand I love cards like that and I'm very nostalgic for cards like that, but on the other hand his iteration of Force of Will is one of my favorite artists in the game as well. So I would be happy with either like a full art Songcrafter mage doing that, or I'd be equally as happy with one slinging chains between pillars.
You know, I'm here to ask the difficult questions, Sam. That's my hope.
Oh man, toughest one I've gotten all week.
No, it's a great choice. It's a great
Thanks.
choice. Well, Sam, this has been a delightful conversation. Both Too Long Didn't Read and Circle of Life, really exciting in very different ways. And I hope that you get to continue exploring both and they both continue to develop in exciting ways. If folks want to learn more about those cubes, perhaps reach out to you, where would be the best place for us to point them?
Discord, probably. I don't have much of a presence online, unfortunately. No Twitter, no anything like that.
Sounds like life is good then, huh?
Oh, I'm trying. I guess. Is there a way to message people on Cube Corporate? I don't think so. If only, if only. Discord is probably best then.
So, what it sounds like is either Discord or draft your cube and then leave a comment on the draft.
Yes, please do. I'm always here for the feedback.
Perfect. Well, Sam, thank you so much again for your time and for sharing so much about this. Looking forward to more opportunities to connect in the future.
Absolutely. It was great to be here. Thank you for having me.